Square Enix is aware of the, to quote, decline in game quality and a loss of fans. There's a lot to talk about. Let's get right on into this. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and just recently there was a Square Enix shareholder meeting, and one of the people that attended this meeting posted about it on Twitter. I'll leave a link in the description down below to their account and to their tweets, but today I want to talk about the stuff pertaining to Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. Now this was translated by Grok, so take it with a grain of salt, but according to @use__ on Twitter, the question that was raised is the following. Are you aware that since Final Fantasy XIV's Dawntrail, there has been a decline in game quality and a loss of fans? The response was this: I am aware. Since Final Fantasy XIV reached a milestone with Endwalker, it has been moving toward the next decade with Dawntrail. The development team is working. Great translation, Grok. Anyways, the development team is working to ensure that players can enjoy it from 8.0 onwards. There is an opinion that producer Yoshida, who is juggling multiple roles, may not be able to focus on Final Fantasy XIV due to his busy schedule, but he believes that the work he is currently doing concurrently will definitely contribute to Final Fantasy XIV as valuable experience. Now that was quite a bit of information packed into a quick little response. Let's depack it, let's talk about it, and let's talk about the future of Final Fantasy XIV. It's no real big secret that Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is kind of losing players. Public sentiment has been polarized at best when it concerns Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, and I'm sure that if you're in touch with the community, or you've interacted with it at all, you'll notice there's a lot of people that either really like Dawntrail and defend it ardently, or a lot of people that severely dislike Dawntrail and also decry it ardently. Just a couple of days ago, we talked about on this channel that there is data from Lucky Bancho showing Dawntrail is losing players, and a lot of them, with a decline even greater than what we saw in Endwalker. I think it's also fair to say, at least in my own experience, that reception to the latest content that is meant to really retain player interest, that being the Occult Crescent, hasn't landed that mark for a lot of people. There's been a lot of people, myself included, who felt burnt out on that content way too quickly. And it felt like a step backwards in design in a lot of key areas, such as incentives, such as the raid, such as fates, etc., when compared to, say, the previous incarnation of this type of content that we got with Bozja. And while I think the story has really had this big turnaround with 7.2, I really enjoyed that story. I think it's fair to say the storytelling quality has gone up a lot since the days of 7.0 and 7.1, but a lot of people are going to need more than just a single patch being pretty good story-wise to want to come back fully and to embrace the Final Fantasy XIV brain rot many of us felt years ago. And I think overall, when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV, it's an important first step to be able to admit, as a game, that there are problems that need to be addressed. There are things that need to be fixed. Because if you don't acknowledge that there are problems, then how are you gonna fix them? And I've also been talking recently and saying pretty much what he said right here. The big systemic changes that I think Final Fantasy XIV and its core overall design philosophy needs aren't something you just simply fix in a patch. These patches are worked on for months and months ahead of time. You can't just throw away all that work, start from scratch, and all of a sudden get a finished product out in time. That's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. And I've said before, even recently, that if we're going to see a lot of these big systemic changes that I personally believe the game needs to see when it comes to the content cadence, when it comes to the quality of the content, and the quality of the grinds that Final Fantasy XIV has, when it comes to better job design, when it comes to experimenting with types of content the game hasn't really seen before, and possibly even gameplay avenues, that is stuff that takes time. And I don't think any of that stuff really happens or we really start to see those elements, those big long-term systemic issues that I think the game has and needs to be addressed. I don't think they get addressed until, say, a big 0.0, 8.0 being the next one up. It's like, I don't see them seeing all this feedback from 7.0, 1 and 2, throwing away all the work they've done for, say, 7.3 and saying, okay guys, don't worry, magically we're gonna be able to just fix the game in an afternoon, we got you covered. again, it's just not realistic. And like, as a player, yeah, that is kind of annoying, because one of the reasons I talk about Final Fantasy XIV is because I love this game. I have some of my favorite gaming memories in Final Fantasy XIV. I want to enjoy the game. I want that reason to want to continue playing. That is not something that is fixed overnight. Let me reiterate, that is not something that should be fixed overnight. I want good, thought out, long-term solutions to these problems. I don't want them to just throw something random at the wall for every single bullet point that is brought up in feedback and only give it 5 minutes of thought. In order, in my opinion, for this game to really find its legs again, that requires time, that requires thinking, that requires feedback, that requires clear communication. I think this stuff is a good first step, and I talked about it before. Final Fantasy XIV, in my opinion, this is like their first big kind of L when it comes to an overall expansion. Yeah, sure, Endwalker had its detractors as well, but overall, I think a lot of us have fond memories from Endwalker. And while you can see a lot of these conversations kind of find their beginning in Endwalker, they really took off with Dawntrail, because Dawntrail itself was wildly disappointing for a lot of people. And like, I've played MMOs where they've had bad expansions back to back to back, right? And like, I've been down this road before, and I've also seen those same games get significantly better. And I don't see a reason why Final Fantasy XIV can't also get better after an L, after a really polarizing expansion. I don't think Final Fantasy XIV is dying at anything like that. It just needs to reorient itself, stop being so conservative when it comes to its overall content production, embrace trying new ideas, think up good, thoughtful new ideas, and create more interesting content that doesn't just boil down to killing the same mobs over and over and over again in glorified fates, or reusing the fate content over and over and over again with minimal changes, and thinking just because you add something to the game that requires playtime, that is sufficient. We're in an era where in the live service scene for video games, there's more competition now than ever before. Not just within the MMO market, but outside the MMO market. There's plenty of live service games out there that are vying for people's attention, that are being updated frequently with a lot of good and interesting content that mixes the game up. Final Fantasy XIV doesn't really get that much. You can argue the two biggest, you know what, let's make it three. The three biggest, newest additions to types of content Final Fantasy XIV has added recently are Island Sanctuaries. Right, like, come on. Variant dungeons, which are a cool idea, but really struggled from a reward perspective, and from finding a reason for people to continually want to come back and interface with that content. And then also chaotic raiding. Individually, these are cool ideas. Individually, these ideas can be iterated on in the future to really introduce something cool and interesting for Final Fantasy XIV. But these initial iterations, I don't think are sufficient to turn around the reputation of Final Fantasy XIV as of now. So I think Square Enix's method for addressing a lot of this feedback will be the following. Stick to their guns when it comes to Dawntrail's patches. Those ideas are already set in stone. You just execute on those ideas. Maybe tinker with some things here and there if you believe you can make it better. But a lot of like what is coming in, say, this patch, already set in stone. Listen to the player feedback, listen to what people like generally speaking and what they don't like generally speaking, and have an open mind going into 8.0. Be willing to mix up the formula. My opinion, a lot of this end game content needs to come online way early in a patch cycle. We shouldn't be waiting until the 0.25 patch to get stuff like the Occult Crescent. We shouldn't be waiting till like say 0.21 to get crafting and gathering content that is in the style of, say, Cosmic Exploration. The first initial iterations of those types of content, in my opinion, should come online way early in the patch cycle. There shouldn't be this, like, weird specter of dead air over the beginning of an expansion, because that is when the hype is ripest. That is when the iron is hottest and you need to strike. That is when people are most excited to play an MMORPG with the launch of a new expansion, when everything feels fresh and new, or at least it should. That's the important thing. Final Fantasy XIV needs to feel fresh and new again. There's so much content that is added to this game, where it just feels like it's an imitation of what has come before. And when something quote-unquote new is truly added to the game, it feels more like a lateral move compared to a forward move. Chaotic raiding is a really cool idea. A harder version of a 24-man raid. Really neat idea. Is the problem that chaotic raiding exists? No. Is the problem that in an expansion that is kind of the only new thing being introduced? That would be my argument. What I do find a bit interesting is that in this question that was posed at the shareholder meeting, Yoshida wasn't brought up. That is something that, at least according to this tweet and the way that it's framed, makes it seem as if Square Enix voluntarily provided that information. Now, I'm a Yoshi P fan. A lot of the stuff he works on, I generally enjoy. I love Final Fantasy XIV. I quite enjoyed Final Fantasy XVI, but I do have my problems with both of those games. But I also think it's important to note, especially when it comes to modern game development, no studio is just one guy. And I don't think it's fair or right to try and put all the blame on Yoshi P's shoulders when he's not the only one making decisions. He's not the only one, like, in a back room somewhere with a soldering iron and a circuit board crafting this game. That's just not what's happening. He's just the big name everyone thinks of when they mention Final Fantasy XIV. He's the one that puts himself out there on the camera during these live streams, presenting the new content. In a lot of ways, he is the face of Final Fantasy XIV, but at the same time, he's not the only one behind it. And I get that for a game people buy each expansion, pay a subscription to, and that also as an online store, people can get really invested in the game. And when there is a perceived downward trend in overall quality, and when that starts to last quite a while, because expansions go on for a while, right? People want someone to blame. And sure, maybe some of the decisions that he has made are decisions that if you told me point by point, maybe I wouldn't be the most receptive to them. But I don't think it's fair to try and blame all the woes modern Final Fantasy XIV has simply on Yoshi P. I don't think that does any good, I don't think it's constructive feedback, and I don't think it's the root issues Final Fantasy XIV actually has. And heck, even with the way this message was framed, it sounds as if they've had these conversations behind closed doors. It's not as if they're unaware of what's going on the internet when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV. And you know what? I do agree with Yoshi P and what they claim his response is in this tweet, that working on multiple entries could be very valuable experience. If you're only tunnel visioning one thing, that can heavily restrict creativity. And perhaps new ideas, and good ideas at that, can be formed and created because of his work on other projects as well. I'm not willing to throw in the towel or just say the dude is washed to anything like that after what I believe to be one bad expansion. Heck, even two if you want to count the endgame for Endwalker. I'm personally at least willing to see what they have in store for us with 8.0. And we can cross that bridge when we get there. If it's good enough, if it sounds good enough, and when it actually comes online, if it ends up being good enough. If they take a lot of these changes and a lot of this feedback to heart. I hope they do. I want to love Final Fantasy XIV. And when it comes to the story, as of right now with 7.2, they already won me back. And I think a lot of the things that I at least personally want to see out of Final Fantasy XIV are incredibly realistic. They've talked about doing more job changes with 8.0. I'd be interested to see what they have going, or at least cooking for that. I think the story and the storytelling's already going in a far better direction. I really liked 7.2, as I keep saying. So I'm invested to find out what happens in 7.3. It's just I'm not expecting these overall massive changes that a lot of people want to see before we get to 8.0. Because again, assuming Grok translation isn't entirely off the mark here, that's kind of what they're alluding to as well. With the specific line that the development team is working to ensure that players can enjoy it from 8.0 onward. So it sounds to me a lot of this feedback when it comes to Endgame, that's what I'm assuming they're referring to, will be fully addressed with 8.0. And they just don't have enough time while already working on and done so much work for 0.3, 0.4, and probably 0.5 as well. It sucks in the near future, but that's kind of the nature of game development. And I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and Twitter, Jmulls G and all those. I have a Discord in the description down below. You can catch me live on YouTube and Twitch every day. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again!